Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Emergency Podcast with me, Ian Bailey.
And me, Nigel Goodwin.
And I think, Nigel, on this show, look, we talk about politics, and the strapline is we're trying to fix politics one crisis at a time. And this is another one of these weeks where there just seems to be endless crises all stacked on top of each other, and you think, where do we start? But I think that for the last few weeks now, the crisis has been the Labour Party, which seems to be imploding faster than Liz Truss fighting a lettuce. Nigel, you're still a member of the Labour Party, aren't you? So what's your perspective on the inside?
I should just say that before we hit the record button on this, you said to me, "You look tired. You look tired, Nigel." And the truth is, I am tired, and I think a lot of it is linked to modern day politics and the world that we live in and everything else. And I mean, you asked me the question about Labour, I don't know, a few weeks ago, a few podcasts ago, it's like, are Labour already finished? Have they already lost the election? And I was like, look, it was still possible to turn it around. It was even still possible for Keir Starmer to turn it around maybe 6 weeks ago. I think it was hard. I think it's easy. It was easier for Labour to turn it around without Starmer. But today, as of today, whatever date we're on, the 20th of September, 2025, Labour are a year and 2 months into a historic landslide government, and they have been, I don't know what the word is, an omnishambles. They have been an absolute, not just a disappointment, it has been a disgrace, if I'm being honest with you. It's been, and I say that as a Labour member, and they've been an absolute train wreck of a government up to this point.
The scary bit is, as you've just said, a year and 2 months.
Yeah.
Feels far longer than that.
Yeah. And I think the reason it feels far longer is because it's like a continuity government. It has continued from what was before, from Rishi Sunak's government, because they've not actually changed anything. Really, there's not been anything I can think of. And my friend, I was at a friend's house the other day, and I said, and she said to me, it's like they've done nothing. They've done nothing good in the time they've been in. And I said, no, they have. Those things have just been buried. And then she said, name something. And I was like, sorry?
The aqueduct?
Yeah, it's like
Life of Brian reference.
Exactly.
Sorry,
No, you're all good. But it is, I was like, no, that's a good point. I can't, off the top of my head right now, I can't think of anything. And there will be little things they have done. I mean, but that's the point. The country doesn't need little things. The country needs a major alternative to what we are seeing in the rise of Reform and Nigel Farage and everything else.
It's quite sad that you were sat there trying to think of the what's the big thing that we've done. I could think of a couple of things, but they're little. But you're right. I know I've been saying for a little while, I think Labour have already lost the election. Hadn't I gone further on a previous pod and basically said that isn't Keir Starmer literally continuity Rishi Sunak? I mean, it's the same.
Yeah, that's what we discussed. Yeah, and I think, look, it's the Labour Party conference in a week. I am there, although I haven't received my pass yet. Things are very disorganised in the Labour Party right now.
Maybe they're watching this podcast and they've taken away.
Keir Starmer's one of the few people. Keir's buddy, but no. And I was planning to go to partially because I wanted to get the mood, because the mood a year and 2 months in should be still pretty buoyant, but we know it won't be. I'm pretty convinced it won't be. And I wanted to go and I wanted to get the mood and try and talk to people about, well, hey, where do we go from here? It's like a party with 100 and gazillion seat majority that somehow is incapable of delivering any legislation at all, because as soon as the media starts picking holes at Keir Starmer or at Rachel Reeves, they backtrack, and they change their mind. And I think the issue that we've got with Keir Starmer, and look, I will always give a Labour Party leader the benefit of the doubt, and I did. I probably gave him the benefit of the doubt longer than I should. But my hope was, once he got into power, he would then unveil the ideas, right? The things that they were going to do. And that hasn't happened. And it has...
Hang on, before you go on past that, right? There was an awful lot spoken about in opposition with his 5 missions, right? There were big policy platforms that they were going to go after. And you're right, we're still waiting for them to actually be delivered.
Yeah, exactly. But I think part of the problem that we've got into with Starmer is, and it's well documented now that he, vision, the word vision is a dirty word in Downing Street with him. He hates the word. He thinks the concept of political vision is from the Dark Ages. Not continuity, so stable government is the type that makes iterative changes that improve people's lives, right? And the concept, I'm not against. It's like, yeah, I get it. I can hear where you're coming from here, but name me the iterative changes you've made that have improved people's lives in the last year and 2 months. And that is the problem. And because he has no vision, I think the issue with him having zero vision in my mind and not being, and not just not having a vision, but being so against the concept is it means that it's very easy for him to change his mind on something. And I may not be a fan of Margaret Thatcher, but the lady's not for turning. The vision that she had was a vision that she stuck to and she believed in, and people could get behind. With Keir Starmer, he's saying, today I'm going to, stop the boats by doing a deal with the French. But then when that deal doesn't really work out very well and people start hammering him about it, he goes, oh, well, maybe I'll change that deal now. Or two-child policy or all of these things where we know he's going to change his mind because either he'll have to, because he's sinking in the polls and he's getting pressure from people around him. He just doesn't believe in it enough, which is a problem.
But he's not just sinking in the polls, he's sunk. He's less popular than Liz Truss, if that's actually possible.
And look, the one big idea, and I'm going to pull Rachel Reeves into this as well, because they do come as a pair, right? As it normally does. The one big thing was the economy, stupid, right? It was all about growth. And if they could drive growth and be really cautious and really careful about the economy, because people don't trust Labour with the economy and stuff like that, so they're going to prove to everyone wrong that Labour can be trusted with the economy, and if they can get the growth, then ultimately the good times will start to roll. And it'll be slow, but it will happen. The economic news is nothing but bad, and has been nothing but, and it's getting worse. And again, the bond market, the bond market is actually worse now than it was when Liz Truss crashed the economy. It's happened a bit slower, so it hasn't caused as big an impact.
It's the boiling frog syndrome, isn't it? Where
totally.
With Liz Truss, we were thrown into scalding water, and everyone went, and the bond markets reacted terribly, and off she went. Yeah. Liz Truss is sat there complaining and saying, these rates are higher than mine. Why aren't people going at it? Well, the difference, Liz, is that you threw us into lava. And what's happened here is that basically we've been put into the hob, and Rachel Reeves has turned the thing up to high heat, and it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And we're sat there boiling away, and we haven't quite noticed yet. But we will, because we'll be dead.
Yeah, well, we will. Absolutely. And so look, I think to bring it back to your point about, Labour and your questions from previous podcasts about, have they already lost it? I will maintain my unbelievably naive optimism that at this stage in parliamentary cycle, no, Labour have not lost the next general election. They have lost the next general election if Keir Starmer remains as leader, and I say that as a member of the party who will almost certainly remain a member of the party, because I don't give up just because well, it kind of depends who the next leader is, probably, but I do firmly believe now that Labour cannot turn this around with Keir Starmer. They need somebody else. I think they need to make that choice very quickly. I think I said to you the other day that at this rate he could be gone by the conference, because they're circling. They're clearly having backroom conversations about getting rid of him now.
Yes,
and that does also mean Rachel Reeves will go as well, because it's a perfect opportunity to clean the house.
Look, I think the joy of politics in the last 10, 15 years is you start to get a feel of these things, and there is an absolute stench of death about this government. I was listening to the Rest is Politics podcast, and Rory Stewart is saying that, look, his feel about the Labour government now is exactly as he felt as the previous Conservative government was literally dying around him. It's death is everywhere, and they all get it. So, I thought I was like you. I thought Starmer could survive the thing until you suddenly had losing Angela Rayner. Okay, fine. Then you've got losing Peter Mandelson, having just defended Peter Mandelson the day before, which felt absurd at the time that he was doing it. And suddenly you're into, well, it is his judgment. It's not Mandelson, it's his judgment that's the issue.
And yeah, exactly. And none of this helps when he will defend Peter Mandelson to the hilt right until the very last second, but he will kick out the likes of Diane Abbott and people like that, long-term parliamentarians. Again, whatever, we can, we're not going to get into a debate about kind of, was she right or wrong or anything like that. But ultimately, that level of almost dictator level, I'm going to take total control of this party, which is also what he's tried to do here, to an extent that I don't think any Labour leader has ever. I mean, even Corbyn's supporters, when they tried to over-left the party, I think Starmer and his crew have just gone almost insane with trying to create total control.
Absolutely, but they're about to lose it, because it would seem that Lucy Powell, who's running for deputy leader, is likely to get it, and she was the campaign manager for Ed Miliband's leadership thing back in 2010, and there's been that's then led to speculation that Ed Miliband might have another go, and he suggested that he might do. Actually, I think it's the opposite. I think it's Lucy Powell doing continuity Milibandism, whatever Milibandism was. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this earlier around kind of, okay, who replaces Starmer, right? And obviously, I have my preferences. I know you'll probably say, well, I don't think it's kind of a one step to the golden ticket. There's probably multiple steps we're going to go through.
So go on, who's your preference?
So in the current parliamentary party, so that it excludes Andy Burnham right now. Because I do think Andy Burnham would be my preference right now if we could get Andy Burnham in. But I think because these things move so quickly, I do think that there's that danger that Keir Starmer just suddenly goes and Andy Burnham doesn't have a seat. So it just doesn't happen for him at that point. The one name that I'd been working it out, trying to work out who would I get behind at this point in the shadow cabinet. Sorry, in the cabinet. So used to them being in opposition. But in the cabinet,
what a slip!
I know, what a slip. I mean, they may be shadow cabinet again soon. But and the one name I hadn't thought about was Ed Miliband. And actually, I'm like, you know what? Ed Miliband has become a much better. I mean, he got the leadership at the wrong time. He was far too junior and everything else, and it showed off. But he's a very good parliamentarian, and he is more on the left of the party. If he's going to be kind of the stand-in that is going to be in for a year or two as they try and stabilise things, I think they could do a lot worse than Miliband. Unfortunately, I don't think that's what will happen. I think it's almost certainly going to end up being someone like Wes Streeting, and that I think would be not the way to fix the Labour Party right now.
So this is where I want to step back a little from Labour and talk about democracy, because there's an awful lot of people pointing at this happening and going, we need a general election, and we need a general election has been the endless tirade for the last few months from the people who lost. Let's be brutally honest about this. You lost and you're not happy, you want an early election. And you know what? That's kind of what oppositions do. We want an election. But so just as a basic understanding, right, in the British electoral system as it stands, there is no general election. There's 650 entirely separate and independent elections held simultaneously. So when you go out and vote, you're not voting for Keir Starmer or for Rishi Sunak or for anybody else that you want. You're not voting for a party. You're voting for the named person on the ballot in your seat, right? And then that all goes to Parliament and they get whatever. But it used to be that in essence, right, although legally you're voting for an individual, people understand that you're voting probably for a party and potentially for a prime minister. So we accept that. And that convention, because it's the British constitution, which doesn't exist, so it's a convention, but the convention has gone. And this, I think, is where democracy starts to become the problem, because in the 2015 Parliament, we had two prime ministers, and that was two prime ministers in the course of only half of the time that Parliament was supposed to run for. And then the replacement prime minister said, I want a bigger majority, so holds an early election, having changed the law so that she can have an early election, and loses her majority. So then in the 2017 Parliament, which, by the way, there was no need at all for us to have, but in that Parliament we then had two prime ministers, because Theresa May goes and then gets replaced by Boris Johnson. We then have the 2019 Parliament, where we ended up with three prime ministers, okay? And every time this goes on. So we end up with all of these elections, and I'm the new prime minister, and it's a new government. Well, it isn't a new government. It's the same government that was voted, and all you're doing is changing the deck chairs. But we're now talking about the 2024 Parliament, where we're already saying Starmer's toast and will get replaced. And as you said, could it be West Streeting? Could it be Ed Miliband, whoever? And that person also is highly likely to go, because once the ship starts sinking, the rats start panicking. So we could be on for another at least 2, maybe 3 prime ministers in this Parliament. And you've got to ask the question, at what point do you start to say democracy is broken? Because I actually think we're way past that. Part of the reason why reform is shooting up in the polls is because people are going, this is stupid.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it's only when you put it into that, into that timeline, and you start listing all of these prime ministers we've had, that you suddenly start to realise that this is not normal, yet it has become the normal. One of the big reasons that is given for why our first past the post system, the system in which the system we use in our general election democracy, our parliamentary democracy, that one of the reasons why it is often defended is because it produces stable governments. And historically, that is true. And look, I am not a fan of first past the post system. I believe that it is a relic of a very old age when there was a two-party system, and it made more sense back then. It doesn't make sense for the modern age, and it particularly is unfair on smaller parties. It's particularly unfair that a party can win a third of the vote and then completely have the complete mandate to do what they want. It's unfair. But I do understand the argument about it produces stable governments. It's generally been a fair point. And yet, in the last 10 years, it has not. And we've had multiple elections, and they have not produced stable governments. On paper, they look stable because they might have a big majority, like Boris had a big majority, and Starmer's got a big majority. But if you're changing your prime minister every 5 minutes because the going gets too tough and they're not popular anymore, then how is this even vaguely working anymore?
Right. And this I think is the rise. Sorry, I'm just going back in time and just wanting to check, because to give an example as to where first past the post has utterly failed. So we're talking about everything post 2015 having been normalized chaos, but the 2015 election itself was a very clear indicator as to how broken the system is. Look, as a Liberal Democrat, the Lib Dems are in favour of electoral reform, effectively because we get votes and it doesn't translate into many seats. Until recently, because we know how to do it, and we're gaming the system. But in the 2015 election, okay, so the thing that put the pressure on Cameron to hold the Brexit referendum is that in the 2015 election, UKIP got 3.9 million votes nationally and no seats. And that, from a democracy perspective, is really bad. You can't have a significant number of people voting for a party and it not getting any seats at all. But because we don't have national elections, we do not have a national election. We have lots of local elections all held at the same time. Unless you can actually concentrate the vote into a seat, then you don't take it. It's first past the post. It's the first person to get a majority in that individual seat. So the start of it being broken was the 2015 election. That then forces the Brexit referendum, and then it's just become chaos. Look, you're saying about stable government. We're now at a place of, right? You used to get it where occasionally you would get a government would win a decent sized majority, and decent used to be 40 seats. Right. Occasionally, you would do much better than that. So the Labour government post-war had, I think, a chunky majority into 3 figures. And then obviously Thatcher in 83 was 144, and then 87, 101. Right. And then Blair comes along in 1997 and got, was it 169?
Yeah.
And then and then it sticks around 165 in 2001. So you do get these parliamentary landslides, but they used to be the exception. We've then had it where after we started getting these swings, and again, UKIP, right? I'm not a UKIP supporter, UKIP / your reform, but that's a democratic vote that counts for nothing. But we've ended
Agree.
up in this place now where landslides keep happening. So, Boris Johnson won a majority of 80, which is almost a landslide in 2019. A sizable, chunky majority. And everyone said, oh, he's in for 2 terms. He's in for 2 terms because you don't overturn that one quickly. Well, hang on a second. Not only was he thrown out, and then the replacement for him thrown out as well before we got to 5 years, but then the Tories with their 80-seat majority got replaced by Labour with a 174-seat majority. And now there's some polls showing that Reform could win the 2029 general election and have a 200-seat majority. It's broken. It's completely and totally broken.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that we've moved on to talking about this because we've done a lot of talking about what's broken in this country and how the country needs to come to terms with the fact that it is way more broken than people are willing to accept because we are the frogs in boiling water. That we've struggled to come to terms with just how broken it is. But the one core piece of our country that is so broken that if we don't fix it, it will continue to lead to completely unstable governments is our actual democracy, the way in which the way in which we elect people. And I've had people on the left coming to me saying they used to support electoral reform and going to proportional representation, and now they're like, oh no, I won't want that now because it would produce way too many reform MPs. And I'm like, no, you don't change your rules just because you don't change your principles and stuff like that. It's like I am a firm believer that one vote. Every vote, sorry, not one. Every vote should matter. Every vote should count equally, rather than a vote in a marginal seat being worth hundreds of times more than a vote in, say, my constituency, where I live in an unbelievably safe Labour seat. Maybe not much longer. I don't know. But I'm not a UKIP or a Reform supporter, of course. And anyone who's watched any of these videos will certainly know that. If you look at our comments on YouTube, you will see people laying into us for our dislike of Reform.
You're not patriot.
We're not patriotic enough, it's true. When a party wins 4 million votes, they deserve to have a representative number of seats. They deserve it. And then also what's important about that is if they get that, is we then get to see how they operate in opposition or in government. This is why it's so important, because until it happens, we don't know. Right? It's like with Reform now, the fact that they've won all these councils, right? They've won all these councils. We get to see how they do, and judge them based on that. That's what democracy is supposed to be. But if we continually, shut the door on all of these smaller parties, and again, we can include the Greens, we can include the Liberal Democrats before this last election, where, they've generally missed out many times because of this, it's just unfair. It's as simple as that.
So look, in the democratic system that we've got, right, where it is first past the post, but it would be the same if we had a proportional system as well. You always get the correct result because it's what people vote for. Look, I mean, the confession time is I've run for election 6 times at different levels, including in the general election of 2024, and I won once. And I didn't win my seat at the general election. But it's always the correct result because that's what people have voted for. The problem, though, is that a lot of the time it's not now that people are voting for something, they're voting against something because this is what the system is forcing them to do. And when they can see that the system is screamingly unfair and bent and biased all over the place and out of shape, then that only exaggerates those behaviours. With the greatest of respect to Labour's 174-seat majority, right, considering the percentage share of the vote that they got nationally, that's an absolute aberration of a result. There is no way they should have won anything like that number of seats based on,
Yeah, I'll go as far as to say it's shameful. It's like obviously I was celebrating on the night, but it's like I'm still, I still have a conscience about these things. It's wrong. It's fundamentally wrong. 2/3 of the people who voted did not vote for a Labour government. And I always love checking back on this. And I'll ask you a question actually. Do you know the last time a single political party won more than 50% of the vote?
It's going to be something like 1951.
It's even earlier.
God.
It's 1931. In 1931, Stanley Baldwin of the Conservative Party won 55% of the vote.
Wow.
which of course produced a very healthy, you know, number of seats, 470 seats. He won that, and it's nearly 100 years ago. Since then, obviously there's no one alive today who remembers Stanley Baldwin as a prime minister. The reality is that since then, not one single one of the great leaders we have had, one of the great prime ministers we have had, has actually had what I would call a true mandate from a majority of the country to lead the country, even though they will claim a mandate officially, because of course that's how our system works. That is part of the problem here. And now we're in a situation where, as you say, people are so angry that they are pushing back against whoever's in power, because the people in power aren't fixing things. The Tories didn't fix it, so they went to Labour. Labour didn't fix it, so they'll go somewhere else.
And your point about people who were in favour of electoral reform until it suddenly started working for them, and then we don't want that now. We're already seeing that. I've seen some people on social media on the reform side hating the idea of putting in the proportionate system, which is reform policy, by the way, because it would reduce the size of their majority on paper. That's not how it works, guys. You've actually got to have it where there is a basic principle called democracy, where, as you said, every single vote should count equally. I've supported this since I did A-level politics in the mid-1990s. And that was not a popular position to be in. When I was a Labour Party member after, with 2 Blair landslides, I'm like, these are wrong. Oh, what do you mean they're wrong? Well, we shouldn't have had this as a landslide because we didn't actually get that many votes. And it's the same. Everyone talks now about the Starmer government, and this is why I think they really are in peril, because despite having a 174 seat majority, it was what, a third of the vote share. It's so wafer thin and spread very, very wide, and you can see the support collapsing in front of it. And there was a poll that put them on, what was it, 16.16%.
Yeah, and this is where, and look, no party is in a proportional system is running away with anything. I mean, yeah, Reform are way ahead, but again, on a proportional system, Reform would not get, they'd get a third of the seats, right? They'd still probably end up forming a government because everyone else would just be scrambling around. We don't know, but
if how people vote, that's what we should get.
Yeah, absolutely. As much as I don't want it, as much as I desperately don't want to see Nigel Farage as Prime Minister, is democracy has to produce the governments that people vote for, and it does. And right now it is not. And this shows the doubts about Labour at the last general election, because yes, they gamed the system. They did. They fought in the seats they needed to win, and they won those seats, just like the Liberal Democrats fought in the seats they needed to win, and they won those seats. But they gamed the system. But if we look at the actual percentages, a lot of people had their doubts about going to Labour, and yet they ended up, and now they're even more angry because Labour are in. They didn't vote for them,
and they voting failed against something else. A lot of people.
Exactly.
So this is now, I think, the danger that we're now in, which is the electoral system, the democratic system in the United Kingdom is now in disrepute. It's not going into disrepute; it is in disrepute. And having been going out and doing some campaigning and canvassing over the last few weeks, there's an awful lot of confused and a little scared voters out there. And what they do know is that the parties they voted for previously, they don't want to vote for again, because frankly, all of this talk about the Overton window, and I know it's one of these like kind of technical phrases, all it's saying is like the boundaries of the possible, so left, centre and right, is not the entire spectrum, it's just the boundaries of reality. And it does shift left and right, and at the moment it's shifting quite a long way to the right, and it's leaving people outside of the boxes where they think that they are. So they're looking at it going, well, I don't think I want to vote for that anymore, but at the same time I might have voted against this, and they're kind of over there now as well, and they're literally lost. So I think that we've been having election results which have been increasingly chaotic, and then you end up with a government where on paper you've got a big majority, but it's internal warfare and several opposition things, and that's how you keep changing prime ministers. Are we going to have the same thing again? By the time we get towards 2029, if you've ended up with Reform continuing to have this big poll lead, and instead Labour are just squatting, saying, we've got a mandate, but we're now on our 4th prime minister or something, that is the point where I do think that the electorate are likely to beat any party who's been giving this sucker, and that is unfortunately the Tories and Labour. And I think that'll be good news for my party, the Lib Dems. I think it'll be good news for the Greens. It'll be good news for the four different factions within your party as they all break apart and start fighting each other. Some of them might pick up a few seats, but ultimately it's going to be bonanza time for both Reform and probably Advance, which is the really, really, really scary splinter group of Reform. It'll be great for them because people are going to be like, not just a plague on all your houses, but burn everything down.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's we're in, we're through, whatever analogy you want to use, we're through the looking glass, down the rabbit hole, all of those things right now. We're not in Kansas anymore. It's so. This is the reason why I think a lot of political commentators are not necessarily commenting as much on this right now. It's more because they're looking at the polls aghast. They don't know what's next. And again, political commentators, well, hey, they got paid for it, right? They're pundits like everyone else. They get paid for their knowledge and for understanding. Well, hey, look, historically, when this kind of thing happens, it leads to this. There is nothing in British parliamentary history that explains this situation. It is a very unique situation we found ourselves in, and who knows what
The
could
best
happen
way,
next.
I think, the best way to explain it is that the impossible is now possible.
Yes, yes.
Um, how can I put this? Going from an 80-seat Tory majority to a 174-seat Labour majority in a single parliament isn't just impossible; it's insane.
Yeah,
And yet it happened.
yeah. In
Honestly, it's completely impossible for there to be such a massive swing, and yet we had that.
And that's the other point about stable government, right? It's like that first past the post produces stable government because the reason why normally what you would see is, again, Boris Johnson wins an 80 odd seat majority, and then, okay, people aren't happy with him, but he calls another election, and what happens is he scrapes through. He maybe wins a 20-seat majority. That is what happens and the reason why that's actually important in our first past the post system is that it allows governments, once they're in, to plan long term. Instead of the dangerous thing when governments are in power is that they often just plan for the next election, which means they don't do the long term planning that we need to enable us to actually move forward as a country. When you've got 140, 150, 170 seat majority, you can plan for 10 years in power. That's what Tony Blair was able to do, right? He was able to plan for a long time in power because realistically, there is no way he was going to lose the 2001 election or even potentially the 2005 election, right? And that's the same situation Keir Starmer found himself in, and yet here we are. All bets are off. I don't see a world where he could win the next.
No.
He could win the next general election.
Well, it's again, the impossible is now possible. So
absolutely. I
have no idea how. Right? I can give you a few scenarios, but they're all very unlikely. But here's the point: you just hit the key point. Politics, right, and not just politics, but government has been reduced to these little tiny bursts where you're not just fighting against the other party; you're fighting against yourselves. So, in the space of 10 years, we had a David Cameron government that lasted for a year and a bit. We then had a Theresa May government with an election in the middle that lasted for 2 years. We then had a Boris Johnson government with an election in the middle that lasted for 2.5 years. We then had a Liz Truss government that lasted for 5 seconds, and then a Rishi Sunak government for another couple of years. And every single time there was a change of prime minister, even though they were all conservative. Every single one of them said, we are a new government and we've got to have new priorities. And we're going to, I don't know, Liz Truss was the epitome of madness in terms of, she was like, right, we're going to set fire to the world and we're going to do all of this, right? But she was literally what the rest of them have done, only on a more direct scale. You cannot plan any kind of continuity when you keep changing leadership, right? A new government every 5 minutes. And this is exactly where we're at. Starmer's come in and, if anything, as we both said, it's continuity Sunak. So although it's doing the exact same things, it's a whole new team of people. Starmer version 2, he's done his relaunch with his reshuffle, but he's put all of the same people around the table just in different chairs, which means all of the ministers now don't know their jobs. So nothing happens, and then we'll have a change of prime minister again, and then we'll have Wes Streeting, and then I don't know, Pat McFadden, and only then does Andy Burnham come in as the fourth. I'm holding out for this. I want 4 prime ministers. Right? Let's break that record. Let's break the record, right? Then Burnham comes in at the end. You can't do anything with that level of chaos. And that just means that Britain continues to be more broken. We slide further backwards. Our wages have absolutely stagnated since the financial crash, and they are continuing to get further away from where they need to be. Politics is broken right now. And unfortunately, we appear to be suggesting that, that Nigel Farage is the person who's going to be put in charge to fix it. And I think that's just the point where you start breaking the broken pieces into smaller pieces.
Yeah, exactly. Because ultimately, he is right now following a playbook. It is an old playbook, to be fair. It is a playbook that has been around for a very, very long time from a democratic standpoint in terms of, the populist movement. We saw it all through the 20th century with various different governments, some more successful than others. And right now, Trump is the most successful example of that, or you could say maybe Modi or someone like that in India. There are people out there who have followed this playbook, and that's all that Farage is doing. But what follows them getting elected is them then discovering how hard it is suddenly to be in government and to actually make things work, because a lot of the promises that are being made, "Make America Great Again" is a great slogan, but it there needs to be a lot of substance behind it. But not only does it become incredibly hard for them to do things, they then inevitably start moving away from let's fix democracy to let's just be less democratic in what we do, which is my assumption of what we would see with Nigel Farage. But look, I used to, a good long while ago, when I used to, rage about how broken things were even before they became as broken as they are today. I used to say, when people would ask me the question, what's the first thing you'd fix when you came in? Would it be about hospitals, NHS? Would it be this? Would it be that? Like, no, it would be our electoral system. The very first thing I would fix is the electoral system, because that is the one that gives us the governments that we have that can then produce the fixes.
Let's end this by doing as we've done on other things and go, hi Keir, we know you're watching, right? Keir Starmer, we know you're definitely watching. So you've got a majority of 174, and in that parliament, who aren't Labour MPs, you've got Reform, who back electoral reform, the Lib Dems, who back electoral reform, Plaid, the SNP. Just do it, right? Parliament is sovereign, and you were elected to go out there and do basically whatever your MPs want to go and vote for. So while you're still there, because we know you haven't got long left, give us a legacy. Your legacy has got to be something positive, and that positivity could be electoral reform. What did Keir Starmer give us before he went off to run his donkey sanctuary? He gave us electoral reform. That is the legacy. And with respect to it, we could have it in a couple of months' time, so that all future elections are then done on the basis where, as you put it, every vote counts equally. Yes. And then you can vote positively for what you want, rather than in fear against what you don't.
So there you go. If you're watching this, whether it's Keir Starmer or whether it's one of Keir Starmer's aides who are, kind of continually giving him bad advice, there's some good advice. We've given 2 ideas now. The first one was EU referendum, please, because that will definitely throw the cat amongst the pigeons. And the second one is just do electoral reform, because I will just say, just very quickly, it isn't just all of those other parties you've listed that back proportional representation and electoral reform. The Labour Party membership, the last time they voted on this,
yes,
overwhelmingly support electoral reform. It's just that the people at the top don't.
Look. There's a lot of support within Labour, and I know there are quite a lot of newly elected Labour MPs who are really passionate about this and not here getting much of a voice. So it was a given that if the government introduced this bill, that most of the government MPs would vote for it. I'm just trying to make the point that really you do need a cross-party consensus. I'm suggesting that here and now there probably is one. There isn't on anything else, but on this one there absolutely could be, as long as the machinery within the Labour Party doesn't decide to appoint, I don't know, Peter Mandelson to go and lead the referendum campaign or whatever it was that we were doing. Then we might really be in trouble.
And and on that note, maybe that is the perfect point for us to say thank you. As always, do not forget, please, to like and subscribe. Even if you don't like what we're doing, still like and subscribe, and come and talk to us on
we're wrong.
Come and tell us why we're wrong, and we'll happily have a debate with you. You know, we love doing it. But yeah, it's been awesome. Who knows what we will talk about next? Because who knows what the next crisis will be in the next coming days.
There's bound to be at least 3.
Absolutely.
Right.
Awesome.
We'll wrap it up there then. So thanks very much, Nigel, and we'll see you all on the next one.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Thanks, everyone. Talk soon.